Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Sunday, July 25th, 2021, and around 3.5 years we will reach the 2024 presidential election, more like 3.25 years at this point, where we will find out who the next president of the United States will be. Now, while that seems a very far way from now, in just under 2 years, we will have the first presidential primary debates on the Republican side and potentially on the Democratic side. Now, we all know that the Republican primary is going to be a very large one. We have already seen 3 major contenders publicly express interest in running: Senator Ted Cruz from Texas, Representative Matt Gaetz from Florida, and President Donald Trump. In addition, there are plenty of other candidates who have actively encourage the discussion around their potential candidacy. You have Ron DeSantis, you have Nikki Haley, you have Larry Hogan, you have Donald Trump Jr. You have recognizable names that are considering running for president in 2024. Now, Donald Trump came out on Fox News on the Sean Hannity show and said that he already has made up his mind as to whether or not he is going to run in 2024. He has yet to share that with the public, but the rest of the Republican Party seems to be gearing up just in case. In addition to the potential candidates and those who have publicly expressed interest, in the decline to be candidates list, you will probably find around half of these people ending up announcing that they are running for president. Back in 2013, Hillary Clinton said that she doesn't have the presidency eyed up in her future, that she's more focused on electing Democrats in the 2014 midterm elections. Well, we all know in April of 2015, she sends out that video announcing her candidacy for the presidency of the United States. Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama back in 2006 said that he was not going to run for president of the United States in 2008, and that's exactly what he did. So many of these candidates end up declining whether or not that they're going to run, largely to avoid major criticism, but that's the Republican Party's business at this point. Today's video is solely about the Democratic Party and Joe Biden as a presidential contender for 2024. Now, Joe Biden has not announced that he is running for president of the United States. Back in March, it says here, according to CNBC, that Joe Biden says he expects to run for re-election in 2024. Now, I will first preface this by saying that Joe Biden should never admit that he will not be running for re-election until later on. The reason being that if he does so, the American public and Congress will treat him as a lame duck president. They no longer have to respond to him favorably because they know that he is not going to be running for re-election. It's sort of a continuation of what is traditionally a 3-month period of time where there's a newly incoming president, where the president no longer has that bully pulpit because all Congress and other forms of representatives around the nation, in terms of statewide levels such as governors, attorney generals, etc., they no longer have to listen to the president because all they have to do is wait out 3 months and then he's gone. If he is to say that today, that he was not to be running, that would be very bad for the Democratic Party's agenda and future legislation. So right now, he's keeping the media in a position where he is saying openly that he's considering running for president. Now, if he ends up running for president of the United States, I would not personally be surprised. As it stands now, I expect Joe Biden to run for president again. There are representatives, there are senators who are in Congress that are much older than Joe Biden, that are potentially serving through their 90s. Joe Biden, if to be elected, would leave office at 86. There are already representatives in Congress that are older than Joe Biden and have been serving in Congress for a very similar period of time as Joe Biden has been in American politics altogether. But if Biden was to be that nominee, many people speculate that a progressive will run against Joe Biden in 2024. The question is, would Joe Biden face major opposition, or really, would this progressive candidate, regardless of how potentially big name their name might be, such as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, such as Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, regardless of how big the name may be on the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, will they fizzle out? And I would direct you to 2020, the Democratic presidential primary, in which Joe Biden received 52% of the popular vote and won 46 contests here in this across the nation. I mean, when you're looking at the map here, Joe Biden absolutely decimated this primary over everybody else. And it was not because of COVID-19 that Joe Biden was able to win by such a large margin. It was Super Tuesday, right before COVID-19 had shut down this entire nation. When you take a look at what happened back in January, February of 2020, it seemed as if that Joe Biden was not going to win the presidential primary. But then South Carolina happened. When South Carolina happened, the centrist wing of the Democratic Party coalesced around Joe Biden. Joe Biden's sole performance in South Carolina was enough to prop Joe Biden to second place in the country after being in fifth place in terms of delegate count. So Joe Biden did very well in the state of South Carolina. And then Tom Steyer dropped out of the race. Tom Steyer did not endorse anyone, but he was out of the race. That was one less centrist type candidate that Democrats could have voted for ahead of Super Tuesday. Then Pete Buttigieg drops out of the race. Amy Klobuchar drops out of the race. And I remember watching the news when all of these people came onto television. Pete Buttigieg, Amy Klobuchar, Beto O'Rourke, they all came out and endorsed Joe Biden at a rally in Texas. Now, Beto O'Rourke was the big one. That was the one that certainly propped up Biden in the state of Texas. But Klobuchar boosted Biden in Minnesota. Buttigieg boosted Biden everywhere. And then Super Tuesday occurred. How many states did Bernie Sanders win? 4. How many states did Joe Biden win? 10. Joe Biden won Alabama, Arkansas, Massachusetts, Maine, Minnesota, North Carolina, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Texas, and Virginia. The expectation going into this evening was that Joe Biden was only going to win Alabama. He was going to win Arkansas. He was going to win North Carolina. Sorry about that. There was a car alarm in the background, so I had to end the recording. But here we are back again. Essentially, going into Super Tuesday, Joe Biden was expected to win just 5 out of the 10 states that he ended up winning. If anything, that Elizabeth Warren was a shoo-in in the state of Massachusetts. Amy Klobuchar, despite dropping out, was going to be neck and neck with Bernie Sanders because her votes would have rolled over. But then, people were allowed, I believe, in the state of Minnesota to change their ballot and end up voting for whoever was remaining in the race. But the point being that many of these races were not expected to be won by Joe Biden. And then many of these races and many of these people started dropping out of the race, again, before COVID-19 shut down the country. Michael Bloomberg dropped out and endorsed Joe Biden. John Delaney endorsed Joe Biden. Kamala Harris came out on national television and endorsed Joe Biden. Cory Booker endorsed Joe Biden. Elizabeth Warren was out of the race at this point, and then more elections occurred. On March 10th, Biden won Idaho, Michigan, Mississippi, Missouri, and Washington. In Michigan, Mississippi, and Missouri, Joe Biden won every single county. Now, for reference, back in a flashback, Missouri in 2016 was one of the closest Democratic primaries in the 2016 presidential primary race. Mississippi was won by Hillary Clinton. Michigan, Bernie Sanders won almost every single county, didn't win a single one in 2020, and also Bernie Sanders had won Idaho and Washington back in 2016. So a lot of what was happening in this Democratic primary was that the centrist coalition backed Joe Biden, and they certainly would again if he was the president of the United States running for re-election, as he would be in this scenario. In addition, Joe Biden not only has that centrist coalition behind him, which still remains the heavy favorite within the Democratic primary, the Democratic Party itself in terms of overall composition, you also have to take into account Joe Biden's electoral boost that he gave the Democrats in the 2020 presidential election. When you take a look at this map, you might not see an overwhelmingly Democratic victory. When you take a look at the Democratic victories in the 21st century, this actually ranks 3rd out of 3. Joe Biden was at 306 electoral votes versus Barack Obama in 2012 in his re-election bid at 332, and in 2008 at 365. But Joe Biden offered a boost in certain states that even Barack Obama couldn't do better than some of these numbers. We can actually point it out on a map where you can see where Biden did better than any other Democrat in the 21st century. You can look around this map. Colorado, for instance, is one of those states in which Joe Biden did better than Al Gore, John Kerry, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, so he was able to run up the numbers in some of these states. Colorado, Biden won by 14 points. Joe Biden also did the best out of any Democrat in the 21st century in the state of Washington and Maryland, also in the state of Massachusetts. Quite interesting to see. Maine's 1st congressional district. You also have Nebraska's 2nd congressional district, and don't think I forgot about some of these swing states. You have Georgia, you have Arizona, you have Texas, and you have Virginia. Essentially speaking, Joe Biden was able to offer the best electoral advantage for any Democrat in the 21st century in 128 electoral votes. Amongst those 128 electoral votes, many states here, you have a number of swing districts and states. Arizona, Colorado, Nebraska's 2nd, Texas, Georgia, Virginia. All states that are deemed to be competitive that the Democratic Party is focusing on ahead of 2022 and 2024. So if Joe Biden boosted the Democratic Party's chances and margins of victories, or even brought them to victory for the first time in the century in some of these states, that would also be taken into consideration. You see, when I look at Joe Biden's approval rating right now, I can't imagine that if we had Donald Trump being reelected, that he would be in the same position. Joe Biden is liked by the American public. That's one of the main things that really deferred Joe Biden from the rest of the previous Democratic nominees. While Barack Obama was holding on strong mildly in 2012 in his re-election bid, it wasn't as if he was approved of or liked as much as Joe Biden. Hillary Clinton certainly can't relate, and neither could have John Kerry or Al Gore. But Joe Biden went into the presidential election in November and went on to Election Day with around a +8, +9% favorability rating nationwide, which means that 8 to 9% more Americans liked Joe Biden as a person than those who disliked him. And that has actually translated to a consistent approval across the nation that would likely drive him into victory, especially in a primary. When you take a look at some of these broken down numbers, you'll notice that nearly 90% of Republicans disapprove of the job that Joe Biden is doing. The only reason why Biden's numbers are high are because of Democrats and independents, but primarily Democrats, in which nearly 90% of Democrats believe that Joe Biden is doing a good job. So for 2024, can't imagine there would be a major force to be reckoned with against Joe Biden. I mean, he is the incumbent and would be treated as the shoo-in for the nomination, as would Kamala Harris as the vice president of the United States, the same way Al Gore was back in the year 2000. And if you're looking at the 2012 election, the last time we had a Democratic incumbent, you can take a look at the primary here and notice that Barack Obama easily won this primary. While he only received 89% of the vote, there wasn't really much opposition. 6% wanted to go uncommitted, 2% wanted to go to John Wolfe Jr. Beyond that, there wasn't any major opposition to Barack Obama. In fact, people were talked out of running, notable names that we know now, such as Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, who considered running against Barack Obama in 2012, but was talked out of it by then Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, who retired in 2016, replaced by Catherine Cortez Masto. Now Chuck Schumer presides as the Majority Leader in the United States Senate. But point being that there hasn't been major primary opposition to incumbent presidents on the Democratic side, and neither on the Republican side. If you fast forward to 2016 and you take a look at the presidential election, you'll see that while Donald Trump didn't win the majority of the vote, he was still able to win by a plurality. And while winning by a plurality is impressive, you might think, okay, since the majority of the party didn't vote necessarily for Donald Trump, maybe he would face primary opposition in 2020. I mean, we'd seen how unpopular Donald Trump was. Maybe that would translate to some type of support for Republican candidates in 2020. Well, if you want to take a look, Bill Weld was the only major nominee, and Bill Weld actually served as the governor of the state of Massachusetts, didn't even win the state of Massachusetts, and he won just 2.35% of the vote. As unpopular as Donald Trump was, it did not translate to a primary defeat, which means that even if Joe Biden dips down to low numbers such as Donald Trump was at this point in time, we can actually take a look, it still won't be enough, as it seems, historically speaking, to remove him as the presidential nominee for the Democratic Party. As much as Joe Biden has received criticism from members within the Democratic Party, there simply isn't enough support to oust the incumbent. The American public has an incumbency bias. Donald Trump was the first president to lose his re-election bid since 1988, when George H.W. Bush won his election and then went on to 92 and lost to Bill Clinton. In addition, Donald Trump was the first president of the United States since the 1930s who lost the House for the Republican Party, lost the Senate for the Republican Party, and lost the presidency for the Republican Party. The first president to enter with a trifecta and leave with nothing. Besides the Supreme Court, but that isn't determined to be some type of legislative body that has partisan majorities, more so just ideological majorities. That word really was not doing well for me. But all in all, in this potential primary in 2024, Joe Biden won't face major opposition. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez would know necessarily better to not run against Joe Biden, as representative who was well known across the nation would make a better name for herself by running in an open primary in 2028. While she may not necessarily expect to be winning that primary and going on to win the presidential election, AOC is very young. Joe Biden was the oldest president elected at 78. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, I don't even think, has hit mid-30s at this point. She's 31 years old, would barely be 35 in time for 2024. In fact, turns 35 in October of 2024. So technically speaking, she could have been elected, but there isn't much to say that she has 50 years, on Joe Biden in terms of political experience, or that she would at all be qualified to replace Joe Biden. And the Democratic Party loves to bring up the issue of qualification and electability. But the point being that both Kamala Harris and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez have political futures. And in terms of those who are declined to be candidates, I can't imagine any of them would face off against an incumbent president. Bernie Sanders is not going to run after a second failed attempt in 2020. Elizabeth Warren might try to hold on till 2028, but probably will just remain in the United States Senate. Michelle Obama definitely would not run against her husband's vice president in the White House, and Andrew Cuomo certainly will not be a presidential hopeful for a very long time, or even at all for the remainder of his life after many allegations were brought up against him. So looking at this 2024 race, Joe Biden is 100% secure in the Democratic primary. There is not going to be major primary opposition, and the only reason why you don't see him as the automatic favorite is because we don't know for sure if he's going to run for president and run for re-election in 2024. Time will tell, and Joe Biden will be telling us in around 2 years from now, right around the primary season starting to begin. But my bet is that Joe Biden will be running for re-election. And while there may be that very small portion of the electorate that doesn't want him to be elected as the Democratic primary nominee, as there was in 2012 with very low-name candidates who really weren't getting a significant portion of the vote, the same thing that we saw in 2020 for the Republican Party. Beyond that, there won't be any major or notable opposition to Joe Biden as the Democratic nominee for president in 2024. As much as the progressive wing of the Democratic Party might want to replace Joe Biden, he was chosen as the incumbent and will take that factor into the White House and use it in order to win both the primary and potentially win the general in 2024. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch and then a playlist for my 2024 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.